Hello and welcome to Deep Sleep Seas. I'm glad you're here. Maybe your day has been long, or perhaps your mind is still carrying the weight of everything that came before this quiet moment. Either way, you've found a place to let all of that gently fall away. There's nothing you need to do right now except breathe softly and let your body grow a little heavier with each breath. Your shoulders can soften, your thoughts can slow, and you can simply be here drifting with me. Far below the ocean's surface, in a place where sunlight has never reached, creatures move slowly through darkness, glowing softly like distant stars. Tonight we're drifting down into the midnight zone, a realm of perpetual darkness that begins 1,000 meters below the waves. In this quiet journey, you'll hear about strange and gentle creatures that have learned to live in the cold and the deep, about food that falls like snow through black water, and about the slow, patient rhythms of life in Earth's largest hidden world. Let the weight of the ocean hold you as we sink together into its secrets. But before we jump in, if you enjoy learning about our oceans, you're welcome to let us know where you're tuning in from and what time is it for you. It's always fascinating to see how far our stories reach. And if these quiet ocean journeys help you unwind, you're always welcome to subscribe so you can drift off with us whenever you need. Now, let your breathing grow a little slower as we begin our descent. Our journey begins at the surface of the ocean, where waves catch the sunlight and scatter it into 1,000 dancing reflections. Here in the epipelagic zone, sometimes called the sunlight zone, life flourishes in abundance. This upper layer extends down about 200 meters, though the exact depth varies depending on water clarity and geographic location. Sunlight penetrates easily through these upper waters, fueling photosynthesis in countless microscopic plants called phytoplankton. These tiny organisms form the foundation of the ocean's food web, converting sunlight into energy that flows up through the entire marine ecosystem. Fish dart through the blue water in silvery schools. Dolphins leap and play at the surface. Sea turtles glide past on their ancient migrations. This is the ocean most of us know, the realm of light and visible life, of coral reefs and kelp forests, of everything bright and familiar. But we're not staying here. We're sinking slowly, gently, like a speck of marine debris beginning its long fall toward the bottom. As we descend past 50 meters, then 100, then 150, we notice the light beginning to change. The brilliant blues and greens of the surface start to fade. Red wavelengths, which have the least energy, are absorbed first by the water, then orange disappears, then yellow. By the time we reach 150 meters, the world has become a deep, dusky blue, beautiful but dimmer, as if we're watching the ocean at twilight, even though it's midday at the surface. The water temperature is dropping too, degree by degree, as we leave the sun-warmed surface layer behind. At around 200 meters, we cross an important boundary. We enter the mesopelagic zone, also known as the twilight zone. This layer extends from 200 meters down to about 1,000 meters, and it represents a transition between two worlds. Some light still reaches this depth, but it's faint, a ghostly remnant of the brilliant illumination above. It's enough for creatures to see shapes and silhouettes, enough to tell up from down, but not nearly enough to fuel photosynthesis. Plants cannot grow here. The food chain must rely on other sources. Many of the creatures in this twilight realm have enormous eyes, specially adapted to gather every available photon of light. Others have developed the ability to produce their own light through bioluminescence, creating a living light show in the perpetual dusk. The twilight zone is busier than you might expect. Scientists estimate that around 90% of the world's fish biomass lives in this layer, including billions upon billions of small fish called lanternfish and bristlemouths. During World War II, naval sonar operators were baffled by a mysterious layer that seemed to move up and down in the water column each day, reflecting their signals in strange ways. They called it the deep scattering layer, and for a while they had no idea what it was. Eventually, researchers discovered that this mysterious layer was actually composed of countless small fish and other creatures that migrate vertically through the water column every single day. At night, they rise toward the surface to feed in the relatively food-rich waters above. As dawn approaches, they descend back into the twilight zone, seeking refuge from predators that hunt by sight in the brighter waters near the surface. This migration, involving trillions of individual animals, represents the largest movement of biomass on Earth, happening every single day in oceans around the world. But we're continuing our descent, sinking deeper still. The water grows colder, The pressure increases steadily, adding roughly 1 atmosphere of pressure for every 10 meters we descend. By the time we reach 500 meters, the pressure is 50 times what we experience at sea level. The light is fading rapidly now, reduced to the faintest hint of blue-green glow from above. We pass through clouds of tiny organisms, zooplankton and jellyfish, and strange gelatinous creatures that pulse and drift in the current. Some of them flash with bioluminescence as we disturb them, leaving trails of light in our wake like underwater fireflies. At 700 meters, 800, 900, the last traces of surface light are vanishing. We're entering the realm of perpetual dusk, the deepest edge of the twilight zone, where only the most sensitive eyes can detect any illumination from above. The creatures here exist in a world balanced between light and darkness, between the living realm above and the midnight zone below. Many of them have large, tubular eyes that point upward, scanning the faint glow from the surface for the silhouettes of prey or the approach of predators. Others have become transparent, their bodies turned to living glass so that what little light exists passes through them rather than reflecting off them, making them nearly invisible in the gloom. And then, as we pass 1,000 meters, something changes. The last hint of sunlight, the final trace of blue from above, disappears completely. We've crossed the threshold. We're now in the midnight zone, the bathypelagic realm, where darkness is absolute and permanent. No ray of sunlight has reached this depth in billions of years. The temperature has stabilized at a constant near-freezing 4 degrees Celsius, or about 39 degrees Fahrenheit. The pressure has reached 100 atmospheres, which means every square inch of surface area experiences over 1,400 pounds of force. For creatures that evolved at the surface, this environment would be instantly lethal. But for the organisms that have adapted to these conditions over countless generations, this is simply home. This is where they were born, where they hunt and mate and eventually die. This is the midnight zone, and we've only just begun to explore its secrets. The bathypelagic zone, stretching from 1,000 meters down to roughly 4,000 meters, represents one of the largest habitats on Earth. When you consider that the ocean covers more than 70% of our planet's surface, and that the midnight zone exists beneath most of that ocean, you begin to grasp the immense scale we're talking about. This single layer of water contains more volume than all the world's terrestrial ecosystems combined. It's a three-dimensional realm where creatures can move up, down, and in all horizontal directions through a space that seems almost limitless. And yet, despite its vast size, this zone remains remarkably uniform in its basic characteristics. Wherever you go in the midnight zone, whether you're in the Pacific or the Atlantic, near the equator or closer to the poles, you'll find the same fundamental conditions: perpetual darkness, near-freezing temperatures, and crushing pressure. The darkness is absolute. When we say there's no light in the midnight zone, we don't mean it's dimly lit or shadowy. We mean there is zero light from any external source. If you were somehow transported to this depth with a flashlight and then turned it off, you would experience a darkness more complete than anything available on land. Even in the deepest cave, far from any entrance, there's often some trace of bioluminescence from bacteria or fungi growing on the walls. But in much of the midnight zone, even that is absent. The only lights you might see are the bioluminescent flashes produced by the creatures themselves, brief sparkles and glows in an otherwise absolute void. This darkness is so profound that it has fundamentally shaped every aspect of life in this zone. Eyes have either grown enormous to capture the faintest glimmers of bioluminescence, or they've been lost entirely, evolving away as unnecessary organs in a lightless world. The temperature in the midnight zone remains remarkably stable. At around 4 degrees Celsius, the water is cold enough to numb human skin in minutes, yet not cold enough to freeze. This temperature is maintained by the ocean's thermohaline circulation, the massive global conveyor belt of water that moves heat and nutrients around the planet. Cold, dense water sinks at the poles and spreads throughout the deep ocean, maintaining this consistent temperature across vast distances. For creatures adapted to this cold, it's not a hardship but rather a constant, one of the few reliable features of their environment. Unlike surface waters, which can vary by many degrees with the seasons, or coastal waters that fluctuate with daily tides, the midnight zone offers thermal stability. An organism can live its entire life without experiencing any significant temperature change, which allows for certain metabolic strategies that wouldn't work in more variable environments. The pressure at these depths is truly extraordinary. At 1,000 meters, right at the boundary between the twilight zone and the midnight zone, the pressure is 100 times greater than at the surface. At 4,000 meters at the bottom of the batopelagic zone, it reaches 400 atmospheres. To put this in perspective, if you took an empty aluminum can and brought it down to this depth, the pressure would crush it into a small, dense ball. A human body, mostly composed of water and therefore somewhat resistant to compression, would still be killed instantly by the pressure. The air spaces in our lungs, ears, and sinuses would collapse. Our tissues would be damaged by the extreme forces. And yet, the creatures that live here are perfectly adapted to these conditions. Their bodies contain no air spaces that could be compressed. Many have high concentrations of certain compounds that help stabilize their proteins and cellular membranes under pressure. Some have gelatinous bodies with little solid structure, allowing them to essentially become part of the water column, neither crushed nor needing to resist the pressure actively. The geography of the midnight zone is far more complex than the seemingly uniform darkness might suggest. While this zone exists throughout the open ocean, different regions have different characteristics based on what lies above and below them. Areas beneath productive surface waters, where phytoplankton blooms are common, tend to receive more marine snow, the falling detritus that feeds many midnight zone creatures. These regions support denser populations of life. Meanwhile, areas beneath less productive surface waters, sometimes called ocean deserts, receive far less food from above and support correspondingly sparse communities. The shape of the seafloor beneath the midnight zone also matters. Underwater mountains or seamounts can create upwelling currents that bring nutrients from below and alter the patterns of falling organic matter. Deep ocean trenches can concentrate food in their depths. Continental slopes, where the land mass drops away into the deep, can funnel sediments and organic material, creating richer habitats along their edges. The midnight zone is also affected by the oxygen minimum zone, a layer of water where oxygen concentrations drop to extremely low levels. This zone typically occurs at depths between 200 and 1,000 meters, right where the twilight zone transitions into the midnight zone. It forms because organic matter falling from the surface is consumed by bacteria and other organisms which use up oxygen in the process. At the same time, the water at these depths is isolated from the surface, so it isn't being refreshed with oxygen from the atmosphere or from photosynthesizing organisms. The result is a layer where oxygen levels can drop to less than 10% of surface concentrations, and in some places even lower. Most creatures cannot survive in these conditions, but a few specialized species have adapted to this low oxygen world. The vampire squid, for instance, is one of the only cephalopods that can live its entire life in the oxygen minimum zone, thanks to remarkable adaptations in its blood chemistry and metabolism. The water itself in the midnight zone has unique chemical properties. The salinity tends to be very uniform, lacking the variations you might find in coastal waters influenced by river runoff or in polar regions where melting ice dilutes the salt content. The pH is slightly more acidic than surface waters, partly because of the carbon dioxide released by decomposing organic matter and partly because of the immense pressure which affects how gases dissolve in water. Nutrients that were absorbed by surface organisms and then released as they decomposed filter down through the zones, accumulating in the deep water. This makes the midnight zone rich in dissolved nutrients, even though the lack of light prevents any photosynthetic organisms from using them. These nutrients will eventually return to the surface through upwelling currents, where they'll fuel new growth in the sunlit waters above, completing a cycle that can take hundreds or even thousands of years. Sound behaves differently in the midnight zone than it does at the surface. Water is an excellent conductor of sound, far better than air, and sound waves can travel for hundreds of miles through the ocean. Many deep-sea creatures have developed acute hearing and can detect the faint sounds of prey moving through the water, or the distinctive clicks of an approaching predator. The SOFAR channel, or sound fixing and ranging channel, is a horizontal layer of water at around 1,000 meters depth where sound waves become trapped and can travel extraordinary distances with little energy loss. This acoustic phenomenon occurs right at the boundary between the twilight and midnight zones, and it's used by both whales for long-distance communication and by humans for underwater navigation and research. The midnight zone is also a place of subtle motion. While there are no dramatic currents like those found near the surface or along coastlines, deep ocean currents do exist, flowing slowly through the bathypelagic waters. These currents are driven primarily by differences in water density caused by variations in temperature and salinity. They're part of the global thermohaline circulation, moving water masses around the world over centuries and millennia. For a creature drifting in the midnight zone, these currents are almost imperceptible, but over time they can carry organisms vast distances, distributing larvae and spreading species across entire ocean basins. In the absolute darkness of the midnight zone, life has found a way to make its own light, bioluminescence. The production of light through chemical reactions within living tissue is one of the most widespread adaptations in the deep ocean. Studies have shown that around 70% of fish species in the deep sea produce some form of bioluminescence, and that percentage rises even higher when you include invertebrates like jellyfish, squid, and shrimp. Below 500 meters depth, the figure approaches 90%. In other words, in the midnight zone, the ability to create light is not an exotic oddity but rather the norm, a fundamental adaptation that has evolved independently dozens of times across different groups of organisms. The chemistry of bioluminescence is elegant in its simplicity. At its core, the process involves a light-producing molecule called luciferin that reacts with oxygen in the presence of an enzyme called luciferase. When luciferin is oxidized, it releases energy in the form of light rather than heat. Different organisms use different types of luciferin, which produce light of different colors and intensities, but the basic principle remains the same. The process is remarkably efficient, converting chemical energy to light with very little waste heat, far more efficiently than any human-made light bulb. This efficiency is crucial in the energy-poor environment of the deep ocean, where every calorie must be carefully conserved. Some creatures produce bioluminescence using their own bodies, synthesizing the necessary chemicals and controlling the light production directly. Others have formed partnerships with bioluminescent bacteria, housing these microorganisms in specialized organs called photophores and providing them with nutrients and a safe place to live in exchange for their light. The bacteria produce a steady glow, and the host organism controls when this light is visible by using muscles to cover or uncover the photophores, or by controlling blood flow to dim or brighten the bacterial cultures. This symbiotic relationship has proven so successful that it has evolved multiple times in different groups of deep-sea fish. The anglerfish, for instance, hosts a single species of bioluminescent bacteria in its lure, creating that famous glowing bait that dangles in front of its mouth. The color of bioluminescent light in the midnight zone is typically blue or blue-green. This isn't a coincidence. Water absorbs different wavelengths of light at different rates, and blue light travels farther through seawater than any other color. Red light is absorbed within the first few meters of depth, which is why many deep-sea creatures are red. They appear black in the absence of red light and are essentially invisible to other organisms that can only see blue bioluminescence. Green light travels a bit farther, but blue penetrates the deepest. By producing blue or blue-green light, bioluminescent organisms maximize the distance their signals can be seen by others. It's an evolutionary optimization, fine-tuned over millions of years to work efficiently in the specific environment of the deep ocean. Creatures use bioluminescence for many different purposes, and understanding these uses gives us insight into the complex social and ecological dynamics of the midnight zone. One of the most important functions is counter-illumination, a form of camouflage used primarily by animals in the twilight zone and upper reaches of the midnight zone. These creatures have photophores on their undersides that produce a faint downward-directed glow, matching the dim light filtering down from the surface. When a predator looks up from below, instead of seeing the dark silhouette of potential prey, it sees something that blends with the ambient background light. The prey essentially becomes invisible from underneath, even though it's actually producing its own light. This strategy is used by many species of lanternfish, hatchetfish, and other small fish that spend time in the dim waters where some surface light remains visible. Another crucial use of bioluminescence is for hunting. Predators use light to lure prey within striking distance, to illuminate targets briefly so they can be seen and attacked, or to startle and confuse prey animals. The anglerfish is perhaps the most famous example of bioluminescent hunting. Female anglerfish have a modified dorsal spine that extends forward over their heads, tipped with a fleshy bulb called an esker that contains bioluminescent bacteria. The anglerfish waves this lure gently in the darkness, and the glowing tip resembles a small organism or piece of food. Curious fish and crustaceans approach to investigate, and when they come close enough, the anglerfish's massive jaws snap shut in an instant, creating a suction force that pulls the prey into its mouth. The anglerfish doesn't even have to chase its food, it simply waits motionless in the dark, letting its light do the work of attracting prey directly to it. Dragonfish use a different hunting strategy. Some species of dragonfish produce red bioluminescence, a very unusual color in the deep sea. Most deep-sea creatures cannot see red light. Their eyes have evolved to detect blue and green wavelengths only. But dragonfish have a special visual pigment that allows them to see in the red spectrum. This gives them what amounts to a private flashlight, a beam of light invisible to other creatures that they can use to illuminate prey without alerting them to the danger. It's like having night vision goggles in a world where everyone else is blind, an extraordinary evolutionary advantage that these predators have exploited to great effect. Communication is another vital function of bioluminescence. In the vast darkness of the midnight zone, finding a mate of your own species is an enormous challenge. The ocean is immense, the population density is low, and you can't see more than a few meters even with the most sensitive eyes. Many species have solved this problem by developing species-specific patterns of bioluminescence. Each species flashes in a unique rhythm or pattern, like Morse code made of light. A potential mate can recognize the pattern from a distance and move toward it, while other species ignore signals that don't match their own pattern. This allows for reproductive isolation even in the mixed communities of the deep ocean. Some species of flashlight fish have large photophores under their eyes that they can blink on and off rapidly, creating elaborate light displays during courtship. The patterns are so distinctive that scientists can sometimes identify species based on their bioluminescent signals alone. Defense is yet another crucial application of living light. When attacked, many deep-sea creatures release bursts of bioluminescent fluid or flash brightly to startle predators, buying precious seconds to escape. The squid and octopuses that live in the midnight zone cannot produce the ink clouds their shallow water relatives use for defense, because in the darkness, a cloud of black ink would be invisible and therefore useless. Instead, they produce bioluminescent decoys, glowing clouds, or even detachable body parts that light up and distract predators, while the animal itself flees into the darkness. One species of jellyfish, when disturbed, produces a brilliant flashing light display sometimes called an alarm. This alarm doesn't just startle the immediate attacker, it also attracts larger predators to the scene. The jellyfish essentially calls for backup, hoping that a bigger predator will attack its attacker, allowing the jellyfish to escape in the confusion. Some of the most spectacular bioluminescent displays in the ocean come from creatures called siphonophores, which are actually colonies of individual organisms working together. These drifting colonies can stretch for many meters through the water, creating curtains of delicate tentacles that pulsate with waves of bioluminescent light. When disturbed, they light up in cascading patterns, like strings of tiny bulbs flickering on and off in sequence. Watching these displays through the cameras of deep-sea submersibles is a surreal, almost hypnotic experience, like witnessing living constellations drifting through an underwater night sky. The diversity of bioluminescent adaptations in the midnight zone reminds us that this is not a dead or empty place, despite the darkness and the pressure and the cold. It's a living ecosystem, full of communication and interaction, of hunting and hiding, of reproduction and survival. The living lights that flash and glow in these depths are not just beautiful, they're functional adaptations honed by millions of years of evolution. They represent life's answer to the challenge of darkness, a solution so successful that it has become the defining characteristic of deep ocean ecology. When humans finally developed submarines and cameras that could reach these depths and see what existed there, one of the greatest surprises was discovering just how much light there was in the midnight zone. Not light from the sun, but light from life itself, a galaxy of bioluminescent signals flickering in the abyss. Predation in the midnight zone requires entirely different strategies than hunting in sunlit waters, without light to see by, without abundant prey densely packed together, and without the energy to pursue fast-moving targets. Predators of the deep have evolved remarkable adaptations. Many have become ambush predators, remaining nearly motionless in the water column and waiting for prey to blunder within striking distance. Others have developed enormous mouths and expandable stomachs that allow them to swallow prey larger than themselves, maximizing the value of each rare meal. Some have reduced their bone density and muscle mass to the bare minimum, becoming nearly neutrally buoyant so they don't have to expend energy maintaining their position. These are creatures shaped entirely by scarcity, by the need to conserve every possible calorie in an environment where food is precious and opportunities are few. The deep-sea anglerfish may be the most iconic predator of the midnight zone. There are more than 200 species of anglerfish, divided into 11 families, and most of them live in the bathypelagic waters. The females, which are the larger and more recognizable form, can range in size from the length of a golf ball to over 3 feet long, though most species fall somewhere in the middle range. What they all share is that extraordinary bioluminescent lure, the esca, which dangles from a modified spine extending forward from their heads. The structure of the esca varies considerably among species. Some have simple glowing bulbs. Others have elaborate branching structures that resemble small luminous plants or animals. Some species even have multiple lures, creating complex light displays that might mimic a group of small organisms. Each design represents a different strategy for attracting prey, refined through evolutionary trial and error over millions of years. The anglerfish doesn't move quickly or chase prey. It simply drifts or rests in the water column, waving its lure slowly through the darkness. The bioluminescence comes from symbiotic bacteria, likely acquired when the juvenile fish passes through water containing these microorganisms. The bacteria colonize the esca and begin producing light, and the anglerfish provides them with nutrients and oxygen through blood vessels that run into the lure. It's a permanent partnership that lasts for the fish's entire life. When prey approaches the light, curious or hungry, the anglerfish's massive jaw unhinges and opens in a fraction of a second. The sudden expansion creates a powerful suction force that pulls water and prey directly into the mouth. The teeth, long and needle-like, angle inward to prevent escape. Most prey are swallowed whole, sometimes prey larger than the anglerfish's head, thanks to an expandable stomach that can stretch to accommodate enormous meals. Male anglerfish are tiny compared to females, sometimes just an inch or two long. They have no lure, and no real ability to hunt effectively. Instead, they're essentially swimming sperm packets, designed for only one purpose: finding a female and reproducing. When a male encounters a female, he bites onto her body and doesn't let go. Over time, his tissues fuse with hers, his circulatory system connects to hers, and he becomes a permanent parasite, receiving all his nutrients through her bloodstream. Eventually, his organs degenerate until he's little more than a pair of testes attached to the female's body, ready to release sperm whenever she produces eggs. This bizarre reproductive strategy is called sexual parasitism, and it's an adaptation to the enormous difficulty of finding mates in the vast dark ocean. By permanently fusing with a female, the male ensures that his genes will be passed on without ever having to find another mate. A single female might carry multiple males on her body, essentially collecting a harem of tiny parasitic partners. Dragonfish are another group of formidable midnight zone predators. They're smaller than most anglerfish, typically ranging from 6 inches to 2 feet in length, but they're fierce hunters with fearsome teeth. Their jaws are lined with sharp, barbed fangs that look oversized for their bodies. Some species have teeth so large that their mouths can't fully close, giving them a permanent nightmarish grin. Many dragonfish have a barbel, a whisker-like appendage hanging from their chin that can be as long as their entire body. The tip of this barbel often contains bioluminescent organs, and the fish uses it like a fishing line, dangling the glowing lure to attract prey while keeping its own body hidden in the darkness. What makes some dragonfish truly remarkable is their ability to produce and see red bioluminescence. As mentioned earlier, this is extremely rare in the deep ocean. The dragonfish has a special photophore under its eye that emits red light, and its retinas contain a unique pigment that can detect this red wavelength. Since other deep-sea creatures are essentially red-blind, the dragonfish can illuminate prey without alerting them, scanning the darkness with its private spotlight. When it spots a target, it strikes with startling speed, its jaws snapping shut around the prey in an instant. This adaptation is so successful that several species of dragonfish have evolved independently, suggesting that the ability to see red light provides a significant evolutionary advantage in the midnight zone. The viperfish is another impressive deep-sea predator, named for its long, needle-like fangs that resemble a viper's fangs. These teeth are so long that when the viperfish closes its mouth, they actually curve back and up. almost reaching the fish's own eyes. The viperfish uses these fangs not to bite and chew, but to impale prey, skewering them and preventing escape. The fish has a hinged skull that allows its mouth to open nearly 180 degrees, creating a cage of teeth that very few prey animals can escape once they're caught. Like many midnight zone predators, the viperfish has a distensible stomach that can expand to accommodate prey up to 60% of its own body length. This allows it to take maximum advantage of rare feeding opportunities, gorging when food is available and then fasting for extended periods when prey is scarce. Viperfish also engage in vertical migration. Unlike many other midnight zone residents, they spend their days at depths of 1,000 to 2,000 meters, resting in the bathypelagic darkness. As night falls and darkness reaches the upper layers of the ocean, they migrate upward into the mesopelagic zone to hunt. This journey of several hundred meters might seem short, but for a fish barely a foot long, it's an epic daily commute. They hunt in the richer waters of the twilight zone, where prey is more abundant, and then retreat back to the depths as dawn approaches. This strategy allows them to access better feeding grounds while still maintaining the safety and low competition of the deeper waters. One of the strangest groups of midnight zone predators are the gulper eels, also known as pelican eels. Despite their name, they're not true eels, but members of a separate order of fish. They have enormous mouths, utterly out of proportion to their slender bodies, that can open wide enough to swallow prey much larger than themselves. Their lower jaw is actually a flexible pouch that can expand like a pelican's throat pouch, hence the common name. The body behind the head is whip-like and can extend for several feet, ending in a tail that often bears a complex bioluminescent organ. Scientists believe this tail lure might attract prey toward the gulper eel's vicinity, where the predator can engulf them in one quick strike. The gulper eel's strategy seems to be opportunistic rather than specialized. With such a large mouth, it can capture a wide variety of prey types and sizes, from tiny crustaceans to fish much larger than expected. Its skull is flexible and loosely connected, allowing the entire front of the animal to distend. After consuming a large meal, the gulper eel's body can swell visibly, the outline of the prey sometimes visible through the thin tissue of its stomach. It may take days or even weeks to fully digest such a meal, during which time the eel drifts through the midnight zone, its metabolism slowly processing the nutrients. Many midnight zone predators have reduced or even lost their swim bladders, the gas-filled organs that most fish use to control their buoyancy. Maintaining a gas bubble at depth is energetically expensive and requires specialized adaptations to prevent the gas from dissolving under pressure. Instead, these deep-sea predators have become nearly neutrally buoyant through other means. Some have watery flesh with little muscle mass. Others have accumulated oils and fats that are less dense than water, providing lift without requiring a gas bladder. This allows them to hover effortlessly in the water column without swimming, waiting motionlessly for prey to come to them, conserving precious energy. The universal theme among midnight zone predators is efficiency. Every aspect of their biology is optimized to reduce energy expenditure while maximizing the value of rare meals. They don't waste motion chasing prey. They don't maintain unnecessary muscle mass. They don't produce excess body heat. They are machines of patience, perfectly adapted to a world where food arrives sporadically and unpredictably, and where the ability to wait perfectly still in the darkness is just as important as the ability to strike quickly when opportunity finally presents itself. In the midnight zone, where photosynthesis is impossible and living prey is scarce, how do most organisms survive? The answer lies in a phenomenon called marine snow, and it represents one of the most important ecological processes in the deep ocean. Marine snow is the constant downward drift of organic particles from the productive surface waters above, a slow-motion blizzard of dead organisms, fecal pellets, shed shells, mucus, and other organic debris that falls through the water column toward the seafloor. To the creatures of the midnight zone, this is manna from heaven, a reliable source of nutrition in an otherwise food-poor environment. Understanding marine snow is key to understanding how the deep ocean functions as an ecosystem. The story of marine snow begins in the sunlit pelagic zone, where phytoplankton converts sunlight into organic matter through photosynthesis. These microscopic plants are consumed by zooplankton, tiny animals that drift in the current. The zooplankton are eaten by small fish and other predators, which in turn become food for larger animals. At every step in this food chain, organisms produce waste. They excrete fecal pellets rich in nutrients. They molt, shedding old shells and exoskeletons. They die, and their bodies begin to decompose. All of this organic matter is denser than seawater, so it begins to sink. At first, individual particles are tiny, just micrometers across, but as they sink, they collide with other particles and begin to stick together. Bacteria and other microorganisms colonize the surfaces of these particles, secreting sticky substances that cause even more aggregation. Zooplankton produce mucus nets to filter feed, and when these nets become clogged, they're discarded and also begin to sink, carrying whatever they've captured with them. Gelatinous organisms like salps and larvaceans create mucus houses around themselves for feeding, and when they abandon these structures, they sink as well, sometimes carrying large amounts of organic matter. Through all these processes, small particles aggregate into larger flakes that can be several centimeters across, visible to the naked eye. These are what scientists call marine snow. The rate at which marine snow falls varies depending on size and composition, but generally ranges from 50 to 200 meters per day. This means a particle starting at the surface might take a week or two to reach the midnight zone, and a month or more to reach the ocean floor. During this journey, the particle is constantly being attacked by bacteria and other decomposers, which break down the organic matter and release nutrients back into the water. By the time a typical particle reaches the midnight zone, it has lost much of its nutritional value. Only about 1 to 5% of the organic matter produced at the surface actually makes it down to the deep ocean in a form that can support life. The rest is consumed or decomposed during the fall. But that small percentage, spread across the vast area of the ocean, still amounts to an enormous quantity of food. Scientists estimate that roughly 815 million tons of carbon reach the deep ocean floor every year in the form of marine snow. This is comparable to the entire annual catch of all the commercial fisheries in the world combined. Most of this doesn't make it all the way to the bottom, instead being consumed by organisms at various depths along the way. The midnight zone receives a substantial fraction of this falling material, and the organisms there have evolved numerous strategies to capture and consume it. Some creatures are filter feeders, straining large volumes of water through specialized structures to capture the tiny particles of marine snow. These include various species of jellyfish, salps, and other gelatinous drifters that pulse slowly through the water, their feeding structures collecting everything that flows past. Others are more active hunters of marine snow, including certain species of amphipods, small crustaceans that can detect organic particles using chemical sensors and swim toward them to feed. Some deep-sea fish also consume marine snow, either deliberately or incidentally while hunting for other prey. One of the most remarkable marine snow specialists is the vampire squid. Despite its fearsome name and appearance, the vampire squid is not a predator at all. It feeds almost exclusively on marine snow, making it one of the few cephalopods that's not an active hunter. The vampire squid has two long, thin filaments covered with tiny hair-like projections. These filaments, which can extend up to 8 times the length of the squid's body, are covered with sensory cells and sticky mucus. The squid drifts motionless in the water with one or both filaments extended, essentially fishing for marine snow. When particles stick to the filament, the squid slowly retracts it, scraping off the accumulated material and working it into a mucus-covered ball using specialized structures on its arms. Once it has collected enough material, the squid brings the ball to its beak and consumes it. This feeding strategy is extraordinarily energy efficient. The vampire squid doesn't have to swim to find food. It doesn't have to chase prey. It simply extends its filaments and waits for food to drift past. Its body is neutrally buoyant, so it doesn't even need to expend energy maintaining its position in the water column. It has the slowest metabolism of any cephalopod, burning calories at a remarkably low rate. All of these adaptations allow it to survive on the nutritionally modest diet provided by marine snow, thriving in an environment where other cephalopods would starve. The seasonal nature of surface productivity creates corresponding patterns in marine snow flux. In temperate and polar regions, spring and summer bring long days and warm temperatures that trigger phytoplankton blooms, massive population explosions of microscopic plants that can turn entire sections of ocean cloudy green. During these blooms, the production of organic matter increases dramatically, and so does the amount of marine snow falling to the depths. Researchers have documented these seasonal pulses reaching the ocean floor, where they trigger feeding frenzies among bottom-dwelling organisms that have been fasting through the lean winter months. In the midnight zone, which lies between the surface and the floor, these seasonal pulses mean times of relative abundance followed by times of scarcity. Organisms must be able to survive both extremes, feeding opportunistically when food is available and then enduring long periods of fasting. Marine snow doesn't just feed the organisms of the deep ocean, it also plays a crucial role in Earth's climate system. This process is called the biological carbon pump. Carbon dioxide from the atmosphere dissolves in surface waters and is incorporated into organic matter by phytoplankton during photosynthesis. When this organic matter sinks as marine snow, it carries carbon away from the surface and down into the deep ocean, where it may remain for hundreds or thousands of years before returning to the surface through upwelling currents. This effectively removes carbon from the atmosphere and stores it in the deep ocean, helping to regulate Earth's climate. Without the biological carbon pump, atmospheric carbon dioxide levels would be significantly higher than they currently are. The organisms of the midnight zone, by consuming marine snow and respiring carbon dioxide at depth, are direct participants in this global carbon cycle. They're not just passive inhabitants of the deep ocean, they're active players in processes that affect the entire planet. The composition of marine snow also varies depending on what's happening at the surface. In areas where diatoms, a type of phytoplankton with silica shells, are abundant, the marine snow will contain lots of these shells. In regions where other types of organisms dominate, the composition will be different. Some types of marine snow aggregate more readily and sink faster, while others remain more dispersed and sink slowly. This variability creates a complex mosaic of microhabitats in the midnight zone, with different particles attracting different communities of bacteria and feeding different types of organisms. Scientists are still working to understand all the factors that influence marine snow formation, composition, and sinking rates, and how these factors might change in response to climate change and other human impacts on the ocean. Not all midnight zone inhabitants are small, energy-conserving drifters. Some are giants, massive predators that descend from the surface world to hunt in the deep. The most famous of these are sperm whales, the largest toothed predators on Earth. These magnificent mammals can grow to over 60 feet long and weigh more than 60 tons. They're found in deep ocean waters around the world, and they've evolved extraordinary abilities that allow them to dive into the midnight zone and hunt there successfully. Their primary prey is squid, including some of the ocean's largest and most mysterious creatures. Sperm whales are champion divers. They regularly descend to depths of 800 to 1,000 meters, well into the midnight zone, and they can stay underwater for 45 minutes to an hour before needing to surface for air. But these aren't their maximum capabilities. Scientists have documented sperm whales diving to depths exceeding 2,000 meters, and one whale was found with deep-sea fish in its stomach that live only at depths beyond 2,500 meters, suggesting it had dove even deeper. How do they achieve these incredible dives? Through a suite of remarkable adaptations. First, sperm whales can store enormous amounts of oxygen. Their blood contains exceptionally high concentrations of hemoglobin, the protein that carries oxygen in red blood cells. Their muscles contain high concentrations of myoglobin, a similar protein that stores oxygen in muscle tissue. Before a deep dive, a sperm whale takes several large breaths, supersaturating its blood and muscles with oxygen. Then it dives, and its heart rate slows dramatically, sometimes dropping to just 10 or 15 beats per minute. Blood flow is restricted to only the most essential organs, primarily the brain and heart. The whale's massive body acts as a heat reservoir, maintaining temperature even as it descends into the near-freezing waters of the deep. The whale's spermaceti organ, a large oil-filled structure in its head that can comprise up to a third of the whale's total body weight, may play a role in these deep dives. One hypothesis suggests that the whale can control the temperature and therefore the density of the spermaceti oil, making itself more or less buoyant as needed. By cooling the oil, it becomes denser and helps the whale sink. By warming it again, perhaps using blood flow from the muscles, the whale can become more buoyant for the ascent. This would conserve enormous amounts of energy compared to swimming actively, both down and back up. While this hypothesis is still debated, it's clear that the spermaceti organ has some important function related to the whale's deep diving lifestyle. But even reaching the midnight zone isn't the end of the challenge. Once there, the whale must find prey in total darkness. Sperm whales are essentially blind in these conditions, and in any case, many of their prey are too far away to see even if there were light. Instead, they hunt using sound. Sperm whales produce loud, rapid clicking sounds through special structures in their heads, a form of biosonar called echolocation. These clicks travel through the water, bounce off objects, and return to the whale, which analyzes the echoes to build a picture of its surroundings. The clicks are incredibly loud, among the loudest sounds produced by any animal, measured at over 230 decibels. They can be detected by other whales from miles away and may even stun or disorient prey at close range. The whale's favorite prey is squid, and it consumes them in vast quantities. Scientists estimate that a sperm whale eats about 3% of its body weight in food every day, which for a large whale means around 1,000 kilograms of squid. Over a year, a single whale might consume over 300 tons of squid, with hundreds of thousands of sperm whales in the world's oceans. The total amount of squid they eat is truly staggering, estimated at over 200 billion kilograms annually. This means sperm whales are one of the dominant predators in the midnight zone, exerting enormous influence on the populations of deep-sea squid. Among the squid that sperm whales hunt are some of the ocean's most mysterious creatures: giant squid and colossal squid. Giant squid, scientifically named Architeuthis ducks, can grow to tremendous sizes, with the longest confirmed specimen measuring over 40 feet from the tip of the body to the end of the tentacles. Most of this length is in the feeding tentacles, which are thin and very long. The body, or mantle, is typically 6 to 8 feet long in large individuals. Despite their impressive size, giant squid are relatively lightly built and probably weigh only a few hundred kilograms even at maximum size. Giant squid live at depths ranging from 300 to 1,000 meters, right in the transition zone between twilight and midnight. They have the largest eyes of any known animal, up to 10 inches in diameter, adapted to detect the faintest traces of light in the deep ocean gloom. These enormous eyes can detect the silhouettes of large predators, particularly sperm whales, from considerable distances, giving the squid precious seconds to attempt an escape. They're believed to be ambush predators, drifting motionlessly in the water column, and then striking suddenly when prey comes within reach of their two long feeding tentacles, which are equipped with sharp hooks and powerful suckers. The relationship between sperm whales and giant squid is one of the ocean's great mysteries. Many sperm whales bear scars on their heads and bodies, circular marks left by squid suckers. Some have scars from hooks, curved marks that must have been made during struggles with very large squid. These wounds tell us that giant squid don't go down without a fight, that they're capable of inflicting damage even on an animal as massive as a sperm whale. But we've never witnessed one of these encounters. No human has ever seen a battle between a sperm whale and a giant squid. What we know comes from scars on whales, squid beaks found in whale stomachs, and very rare footage of live giant squid in their natural habitat. In recent years, researchers have finally managed to film giant squid in the deep ocean, using specialized camera systems and bioluminescent lures that mimic the distress signals of other organisms. The footage shows animals that are strikingly graceful, drifting through the water with their arms trailing behind them, their eyes reflecting the camera lights with an eerie, intelligent gleam. They're curious, sometimes approaching the camera to investigate, wrapping their arms around the equipment, but they're also skittish, fleeing quickly when startled. These glimpses into their world have raised as many questions as they've answered, reminding us how little we truly understand about these elusive giants. Even larger and more mysterious is the colossal squid. Mesonychortooth is Hamiltoni. While giant squid are long, colossal squid are massive. They have much heavier bodies, with mantles that can exceed 6 feet in length and arms that are thick and muscular. The largest confirmed colossal squid weighed over 1,000 pounds, making it substantially heavier than the longest giant squid. Colossal squid also have hooks on their arms and tentacles, sharp, rotating barbs that can dig into flesh and hold prey. They're found primarily in the deep waters around Antarctica, where they hunt in the darkness of the midnight zone and possibly even deeper, down into the abyssal zone below 4,000 meters. Like giant squid, Colossal squid have enormous eyes, even larger in proportion to their body size. They also have bioluminescent organs near their eyes, photophores that produce light. Scientists speculate these might be used to illuminate prey or perhaps to startle predators, though we don't know for certain. What we do know is that colossal squid are a significant part of the sperm whale diet in Antarctic waters. Studies of sperm whale stomach contents have found that colossal squid beaks are common, indicating these whales regularly hunt and successfully capture these formidable prey animals. In early 2025, scientists achieved a major milestone by filming a live colossal squid in its natural habitat for the first time. The footage, captured by a remotely operated vehicle in the waters near the South Sandwich Islands, showed a juvenile specimen, possibly a teenager in squid terms, drifting through the midnight zone at nearly 2,000 feet depth. Even this youngster was impressive in size, and it displayed the characteristic transparent appearance and enormous eyes that help colossal squid survive in their dark, cold environment. This single observation has already prompted revisions to scientists' understanding of colossal squid behavior and biology, and it hints at how much more there is to learn about these incredible animals. The hunting strategies of sperm whales in the midnight zone remain somewhat mysterious. Some research suggests they may hunt while inverted, swimming upside down so they can look up toward the faint surface light and spot the silhouettes of squid against it. Other studies have found that whales often hunt cooperatively, particularly females traveling in family groups, working together to herd squid or take turns diving deep while others rest at the surface. There's also evidence that the whale's white jaw and mouth might accumulate bioluminescent bacteria from the bodies of consumed squid, essentially turning the whale's mouth into a glowing lure that attracts more squid toward it, though this hypothesis remains controversial. What's certain is that sperm whales are magnificently adapted for their role as apex predators of the midnight zone. They bridge two worlds, breathing air at the surface but hunting in the lightless depths, bringing nutrients from the deep back to surface waters through their feces, connecting the separate realms of the ocean in ways that are crucial for the functioning of marine ecosystems. In their long dives and their ancient conflicts with giant squid, they embody both the mystery and the majesty of the deep ocean, reminders that even in the midnight zone, the drama of predator and prey continues, played out in darkness that humans can barely imagine. While predators like anglerfish and visiting giants like sperm whales capture most of the attention, many midnight zone organisms have evolved strategies based not on hunting but on minimizing their needs. These are creatures that have stripped away every unnecessary feature, reduced their metabolism to the bare minimum, and learn to thrive on the scant resources available in the deep. They represent a different kind of success story, one based on patience, efficiency, and extraordinary biochemical adaptations. Perhaps the most remarkable of these unlikely survivors is the vampire squid, which we've mentioned before but deserves deeper examination. The vampire squid inhabits one of the most hostile environments in the entire ocean, the oxygen minimum zone, a layer of water typically found between 200 and 1,000 meters depth, where oxygen concentrations drop to levels that would kill most animals. The combination of decomposing organic matter, consuming oxygen, and limited mixing with surface waters creates this low oxygen layer. Most creatures avoid it, but the vampire squid has evolved to not just tolerate it, but to thrive in it, making this their exclusive habitat. It's the only cephalopod known that can complete its entire life cycle in such low oxygen conditions, sometimes surviving where oxygen saturation is as low as 3%. How does the vampire squid manage this? Through several key adaptations. First, it's hemocyanin, the copper-based blood protein that transports oxygen in cephalopods, is extremely efficient at binding and releasing oxygen, even at low concentrations. This allows the vampire squid to extract oxygen from water where other organisms would suffocate. Second, its metabolism is remarkably slow, the slowest of any known cephalopod. It simply doesn't need as much oxygen because it's burning energy at such a low rate. Third, its body is gelatinous and flaccid, requiring little energy to maintain. Most squid have muscular mantles that they contract for jet propulsion, zipping through the water with bursts of speed. The vampire squid's mantle is soft and weak, capable of only feeble contractions. It can barely swim, instead relying on its fins to paddle slowly through the water or simply drifting with currents. The vampire squid's feeding strategy, catching marine snow with extended filaments, is perfectly suited to its low-energy lifestyle. It doesn't hunt active prey, which would require bursts of speed and high energy expenditure. Instead, it collects food passively, extending its filaments and waiting for particles to stick. The filaments themselves are covered with tiny hair-like structures called cilia, which help move trapped particles toward the sticky mucus that binds them together. Once a sufficient ball of food has been collected, the squid retracts the filament and scrapes off the food, using arm structures to work it into a package that can be consumed. The entire process is slow and methodical, perfectly matched to an organism living life in the slow lane. Even the vampire squid's defenses are energy efficient. When threatened, it doesn't flee. Instead, it inverts its arms, pulling them up over its body and turning itself inside out. This pumpkin posture exposes rows of soft, fleshy spines called cerci on the underside of its arms. These cerci look threatening but aren't actually harmful. They're a bluff, making the squid look larger and less appetizing. At the same time, this posture hides most of the squid's bioluminescent photophores under the dark webbing between its arms, reducing its visibility. Only the tips of the arms remain visible, glowing faintly in the darkness far above where the squid's vulnerable body is concealed. If a predator attacks these decoy tips, they can regenerate, allowing the squid to sacrifice a small part of itself to escape. If the pumpkin posture isn't sufficient deterrent, the vampire squid has one more trick. It can eject a sticky bioluminescent mucus from glands at the tips of its arms. This glowing cloud contains thousands of tiny luminescent spheres that sparkle and swirl in the water, creating a dazzling, disorienting display. The light can persist for up to 10 minutes, long enough for the squid to slowly paddle away into the darkness. Unlike the ink clouds produced by shallow water squid and octopuses, which rely on creating a dark cloud to hide in, the vampire squid's defense creates a cloud of light, a positive decoy that draws attention away from the escaping animal. It's an elegant solution to the problem of self-defense in a lightless environment. The vampire squid's reproductive strategy is also unusual for a cephalopod. Most squid and octopuses have short lifespans, often just 1 to 3 years, and they reproduce only once before dying. This semiparity, as it's called, is nearly universal among cephalopods. But the vampire squid appears to be iteroparous, capable of reproducing multiple times over its life. Females produce relatively small numbers of very large eggs, each about 10 millimeters in diameter, and they may spawn more than 20 times over their lifetime. With each reproductive event producing relatively few eggs, the total reproductive output is spread across many years. This strategy makes sense in the stable, resource-poor environment of the oxygen minimum zone, where slow development and low mortality rates favor a longer lifespan. Scientists estimate vampire squids may live 8 to 10 years, possibly longer, making them among the longest-lived cephalopods known. Other midnight zone organisms have adopted similar strategies of energy minimization. Many deep-sea jellyfish are nearly transparent and incredibly delicate. Their bodies composed mostly of water with minimal tissue. They drift through the depths, their tentacles spread wide to maximize the chance of contact with prey or particles of marine snow. Some have such slow metabolisms that they grow almost imperceptibly, adding only tiny amounts of tissue each year. Deep-sea amphipods, small crustacean relatives of the familiar beach hoppers, include species that have become giants compared to their shallow water cousins, growing to the size of dinner plates. This deep-sea gigantism is thought to be an adaptation to the cold, stable environment and the low metabolic rates it permits. Larger bodies cool more slowly and can store more energy reserves, allowing these creatures to survive long periods without food. Even the bacteria that colonize marine snow in the midnight zone show remarkable adaptations. Studies have found that these bacterial communities can switch their metabolism on and off, entering dormant states when food is scarce and becoming active only when fresh organic matter becomes available. They can survive for months or even years in this dormant state, waiting for the next pulse of marine snow. This strategy allows them to persist in an environment where food arrives sporadically and unpredictably. The common thread running through all these adaptations is the fundamental challenge of life in the midnight zone. Energy is scarce, food is limited, and every calorie must be carefully conserved. The organisms that thrive here are not necessarily the strongest or the fastest or the most aggressive. They're the most efficient, the most patient, the best at doing more with less. They've solved the equation of survival by reducing the variables, stripping away everything that isn't absolutely necessary, and optimizing what remains. In their success, they demonstrate that there are many paths to evolutionary fitness, and that sometimes the winning strategy is simply to need less than everyone else. In the absolute darkness of the midnight zone, traditional visual hunting and navigation are impossible. Yet life here is far from simple or primitive. The organisms of this zone have evolved extraordinarily sophisticated sensory systems that allow them to detect prey, avoid predators, find mates, and navigate through their three-dimensional world. These adaptations rely on senses that are often poorly developed in surface-dwelling creatures, including chemical detection, pressure sensitivity, and detection of electrical fields and vibrations. Understanding these sensory systems gives us insight into what it's like to live in a world without light, where other stimuli take on paramount importance. Many midnight zone creatures have highly developed lateral line systems, organs that detect pressure waves and vibrations in the water. In fish, the lateral line typically runs along the side of the body and consists of specialized cells embedded in fluid-filled canals. These cells have hair-like projections that bend when water moves past them, allowing the fish to detect even tiny disturbances. In the midnight zone, where prey might be detected by the subtle pressure waves it creates while swimming, a sensitive lateral line becomes crucial for hunting. Some deep-sea fish have enlarged lateral line systems, with canals that extend over much of their head and body. These act like an extended sense of touch, allowing the fish to feel the presence of other organisms from a distance. Chemical sensing is equally important. The midnight zone, like all ocean water, contains countless dissolved and suspended chemical compounds. Creatures release pheromones for reproduction, emit waste products as they metabolize food, and leave trails of scent as they move through the water. Many deep-sea animals have highly developed olfactory organs capable of detecting these chemical signatures at extremely low concentrations. Some species can track prey by following chemical gradients, swimming up the concentration of a scent trail toward its source. Others can identify potential mates of their own species by detecting species-specific pheromones, solving the problem of finding the right partner in a vast dark ocean. Sound plays an important role in the midnight zone as well. While it's relatively quiet compared to shallower waters, which are filled with the sounds of breaking waves, ship engines, and abundant marine life, the deep is not silent. Marine mammals use sound extensively for communication and hunting. The clicks of sperm whales echo through the bathypelagic zone as they hunt for squid. Some deep-sea fish produce sounds by vibrating their swim bladders or grinding their teeth, possibly for communication during mating or to intimidate rivals. Other creatures listen carefully for the sounds of prey or predators, using their hearing as an early warning system. Electroreception. The ability to detect electrical fields is found in several groups of midnight zone fish. All living organisms produce weak electrical fields through the activity of their nerves and muscles, and some predators have evolved the ability to detect these fields. Sharks and rays are famous for their electroreception, using specialized organs called ampullae of Lorenzini to detect the electrical signals produced by prey animals. Some deep-sea fish have similar organs, allowing them to hunt in complete darkness by detecting the electrical signature of prey hidden in the sediment or concealed by the darkness. This sense is so acute that it can detect fields as weak as a few billionths of a volt per centimeter, essentially picking up the electrical activity of a single beating heart from meters away. Temperature sensing also plays a role in the midnight zone. Though the environment is thermally stable, small variations in temperature can indicate the presence of thermal features like hydrothermal vents or can mark the boundaries between different water masses. Some organisms appear to use these subtle temperature cues for navigation, maintaining their preferred depth by tracking the temperature profile of the water column. Others might use temperature to detect prey, as the metabolic heat produced by another organism could create a tiny warm signature against the cold background of the surrounding water. Touch becomes especially important when other senses fail. Many midnight zone creatures have long filaments, barbels, or antennae that extend from their bodies and are covered with sensitive nerve endings. These tactile appendages sweep through the water, feeling for obstacles, prey, or potential mates. Some fish have rays of their fins modified into thread-like extensions that can be moved independently, probing the darkness around them. The vampire squid's feeding filaments are also highly touch-sensitive, detecting the presence of marine snow particles through mechanical contact. Vision hasn't disappeared entirely in the midnight zone. but it has become highly specialized. Eyes in this environment aren't designed to see in the way we understand vision. Instead, they're adapted to detect bioluminescence, the only light source available. Many deep-sea fish have large tubular eyes that point upward. These eyes contain high densities of rod cells, the light-sensitive cells responsible for vision in dim conditions, and they often lack cone cells entirely, which means they see only in black and white. The tubular shape of the eye creates a kind of telescope effect, concentrating what little light is available onto the retina. This design is excellent for detecting objects above the fish, particularly the silhouettes of prey or predators outlined against the faint bioluminescence of the water column above. Some creatures have taken vision to extremes. The bowally fish has one of the strangest eye arrangements in nature. Its tubular eyes are located inside its transparent head, pointing upward through a fluid-filled dome. The fish can rotate its eyes forward when needed, but normally they scan upward, looking for the bioluminescent flashes or silhouettes of prey swimming above. This bizarre adaptation allows the fish to have both excellent upward vision and the ability to see forward when attacking prey, all while protecting its delicate eyes inside a transparent shield. Communication in the midnight zone is challenging without light and with sparse populations spread across vast distances. Many species have evolved elaborate bioluminescent signal systems for finding mates. Different species produce different patterns of flashes, specific rhythms and sequences that function like Morse code. A male looking for a female will produce his species-specific pattern, and a receptive female will respond with her own signal. This allows individuals to find each other in the darkness and ensures they're approaching a compatible mate rather than a predator or a different species. Some organisms have taken this a step further, developing bioluminescent organs that are dimorphic, different between males and females. Males might have certain photophores that females lack, or the arrangement and color of the lights might differ between the sexes. This visual sexual dimorphism allows individuals to not only find their own species but also to identify the sex of potential mates from a distance. In an environment where every encounter is rare and precious, this ability to screen potential mates before investing energy in approach is extremely valuable. Parasitic relationships also rely on sophisticated sensory abilities. The tiny male anglerfish must be able to detect and locate females of his own species, often from considerable distances. It's thought that he uses chemical cues following pheromone trails released by receptive females. Once he's close, he probably uses both visual and tactile cues to confirm he's found the right target before biting on and initiating the parasitic attachment. This multi-sensory approach maximizes his chances of successfully reproducing in a vast ocean where he might encounter only one or two females in his entire life. The sensory world of the midnight zone is fundamentally alien to human experience. We're visual creatures, and we struggle to imagine navigating and hunting and socializing in absolute darkness. But for the organisms of the bathypelagic zone, this is normal. Their brains process information from senses we barely use. They construct internal maps of their environment based on chemical concentrations, pressure waves, and bioluminescent flashes rather than visual images. In their way, their sensory world is just as rich and complex as ours, just as full of information and meaning. It simply uses different channels, different ways of gathering data about the world. And in successfully using these alternative senses, they remind us that intelligence and awareness can exist in forms very different from our own, that the ability to know and understand one's environment doesn't require eyes or light or any of the things we consider fundamental to consciousness. Survival in the midnight zone requires more than just sensory adaptations or specialized feeding behaviors. It demands fundamental changes to the very rhythm and timing of life itself. The organisms that thrive here have evolved life history strategies that differ dramatically from their shallow water relatives, strategies based on longevity, slow growth, and careful management of reproduction. Understanding these strategies helps us appreciate just how different life in the deep ocean truly is. One of the most striking characteristics of many midnight zone organisms is their slow metabolism. In the cold water and low food environment of the deep, there's simply no benefit to maintaining a fast metabolic rate. High metabolism requires more food, and food is the one thing that's consistently scarce. So deep-sea creatures have evolved to operate in slow motion, burning calories at rates sometimes 10 times lower than related species living in warmer, shallower water. Their heartbeats are slow, their movements are minimal, and their growth is gradual, proceeding at a pace that would seem agonizingly sluggish to a surface-dwelling organism. This slow metabolism has profound implications for lifespan. When you're growing and living slowly, you tend to live longer. Many midnight zone fish have lifespans measured in decades, vastly exceeding their shallow water cousins. Some deep-sea fish species are thought to live for over a century. The orange ruffy, a fish that lives at depths of 600 to 1,000 meters, can live for over 150 years, possibly longer. It doesn't reach sexual maturity until it's 20 to 30 years old, and females may not reproduce every year even after reaching maturity. This extended lifespan and delayed reproduction is common in the deep ocean, where the stable environment and low mortality rates favor a slow and steady approach. Reproductive strategies in the midnight zone are shaped by the challenges of finding mates and the unpredictability of food supply. Many species produce relatively small numbers of large eggs, each provisioned with enough yolk to sustain the developing embryo through an extended development period. These eggs and larvae develop slowly, sometimes drifting in the water column for months before metamorphosing into their adult form. The advantage of large, well-provisioned eggs is that the young have a better chance of surviving to maturity, even if food is scarce during their development. The disadvantage is that producing these eggs requires substantial energy investment from the parent, limiting the total number of offspring that can be produced. Some deep-sea species have evolved hermaphroditism, with individuals possessing both male and female reproductive organs. This adaptation is thought to be a response to the difficulty of finding mates in the vast, dark ocean. If you encounter another individual of your species, it doesn't matter which sex they are, you can still reproduce with them. This doubles the number of potential reproductive encounters and greatly increases the likelihood of successful breeding over a lifetime. Sequential hermaphroditism, where individuals start life as one sex and later change to the other, is also found in some deep-sea species, allowing them to optimize their reproductive strategy based on their size and the availability of mates. The timing of reproduction in the midnight zone is less tied to seasonal cycles than in surface waters, where spring and summer bring warmth and abundant food. In the deep, where temperature and day length never change, there are no obvious seasonal cues. Yet some midnight zone species do show seasonal reproductive patterns, possibly timed to coincide with the seasonal pulses of marine snow that fall from the productive surface waters. By timing their reproduction so that larvae are present when food is most abundant, these species increase the survival chances of their young. Other species appear to reproduce year-round, with adults in various stages of reproductive readiness at any given time. This strategy means that reproduction can occur whenever a mate is encountered, rather than requiring both individuals to be in breeding conditions simultaneously. Growth rates in the midnight zone are typically very slow, reflecting the low metabolic rates and limited food availability. A fish that might reach maturity in 2 or 3 years in shallow water might take 20 years to reach the same size in the deep ocean. This slow growth creates interesting challenges for fisheries management. When humans began fishing for deep-sea species like orange ruffy and Patagonian toothfish, they initially assumed these fish had similar life histories to shallow water species. They set catch quotas based on the assumption that populations would recover quickly from fishing pressure. Only later did scientists discover that these deep-sea species took decades to reach maturity, and that their populations were being fished far faster than they could reproduce. Many deep-sea fisheries collapsed as a result, and some have still not recovered. This serves as a reminder that the deep ocean, while vast, is also vulnerable, and that the slow pace of life in the midnight zone means slow recovery from disturbance. Energy storage is crucial for midnight zone organisms. When food arrives, perhaps in a pulse of marine snow or in the form of a captured prey item, the organism must store as much energy as possible to survive the inevitable periods of fasting that will follow. Many deep-sea fish have large livers filled with oils and fats which serve as energy reserves. These lipid stores can sustain the fish for weeks or even months without food. Some species can survive for over a year without eating, living entirely off their stored reserves. This ability to endure extended fasts is essential for survival in an environment where the next meal is unpredictable. The stable environment of the midnight zone also influences life strategies in subtle ways. Without seasonal temperature changes or dramatic environmental fluctuations, there's less pressure for organisms to develop broad physiological tolerances. Many deep-sea species are stenothermal, meaning they can only tolerate a narrow range of temperatures. If water temperatures change by even a few degrees, these specialists struggle or die. Similarly, many are adapted to a specific pressure range and cannot survive if brought to shallower depths or moved to deeper water. This specialization makes them extremely well suited to their normal environment, but also vulnerable to changes. Climate change is already causing shifts in ocean temperatures and circulation patterns, and these changes may affect deep ocean communities in ways we're only beginning to understand. Social behavior in the midnight zone is limited by the low population density and the challenges of finding and maintaining contact with others of your species. Most midnight zone organisms live solitary lives, encountering other individuals only rarely. However, there are exceptions. Some species form loose aggregations in areas where food is more abundant, or around seafloor features like seamounts. These aggregations allow for increased opportunities for reproduction, and may also provide some protection from predators through dilution effect, where each individual's risk of being eaten decreases when they're part of a group. But true social behavior, with complex interactions and communication between individuals, is rare in the midnight zone. The energetic costs of maintaining social bonds and the difficulty of keeping track of group members in the darkness make sociality a poor strategy for most deep-sea organisms. For most of human history, the midnight zone was completely unknown. We knew the deep ocean existed, but we had no way to reach it or study it directly. Early attempts to explore the deep involved lowering weighted containers or nets on cables from ships, blindly sampling whatever happened to be caught when the equipment was hauled back to the surface. Often the dramatic pressure change would kill or severely damage any organisms captured, making it difficult to understand their true form and behavior. The midnight zone remained a realm of mystery and speculation, populated in people's imagination with sea monsters and impossible creatures. The first major breakthrough came in the 1930s when naturalist William Beebe and engineer Otis Barton descended to a record depth of over 900 meters in a steel sphere called the bathysphere. This spherical diving chamber, tethered to a ship by a cable, allowed humans to observe the deep ocean directly through small quartz windows. Beebe's accounts of his descents read like science fiction, describing a world of bioluminescent flashes and strange creatures swimming past the windows. He coined the term marine snow to describe the constant drift of particles he saw falling through the darkness. These observations were revolutionary, providing the first direct glimpses of the midnight zone from a human perspective. But the bathysphere had severe limitations. It could only go where the ship above could position it, and the occupants were entirely dependent on the cable for life support and communication. If the cable broke, they would sink to the ocean floor with no hope of rescue. A truly mobile deep-sea vehicle would require a different approach. That came in the 1960s with the development of the first true deep-sea submersibles, small submarines designed to carry humans to great depths. The most famous of these early submersibles was Alvin, operated by the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. First launched in 1964, Alvin has been repeatedly upgraded and modified over the decades and continues to explore the deep ocean to this day. Alvin's depth rating has been increased multiple times, and it can now descend to depths of about 4,800 meters, well into the abyssopelagic zone below the midnight zone. The submersible carries a pilot and 2 observers, squeezed into a titanium sphere barely 2 meters in diameter. Despite the cramped conditions, Alvin has made over 5,000 dives and has been responsible for numerous important discoveries, including the first observations of hydrothermal vents in the late 1970s. When exploring the midnight zone, Alvin provides an unparalleled platform for observation, allowing scientists to see organisms in their natural habitat, study their behavior, and carefully collect specimens using mechanical arms. However, human-occupied submersibles have limitations. They're expensive to operate, requiring a support ship and crew. Each dive takes hours, and the occupants must endure cold and cramped conditions. The number of people who can observe directly is limited to those who fit inside the submersible, and most fundamentally, the presence of the submersible itself, with its lights and motors and the physical disturbance it creates, can alter the behavior of the creatures being studied. Many deep-sea organisms flee from the lights and noise. while others are attracted to them out of curiosity. It's difficult to know how much of what we observe is natural behavior and how much is a reaction to the presence of the submarine. These limitations led to the development of remotely operated vehicles, or ROVs. These are robotic submarines controlled by pilots on the surface through long cables that provide power and communication. ROVs can carry more equipment than human-occupied submersibles, can stay down longer, and can take more risks since there are no human lives at stake. Modern ROVs are equipped with high-definition cameras, sophisticated lighting systems, robotic arms for collecting samples, and a wide array of scientific instruments for measuring temperature, salinity, chemical composition, and more. Some of the most advanced ROVs, like those operated by the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute, can descend to 4,000 meters or deeper and can stay down for more than 24 hours at a time. ROVs have revolutionized deep-sea biology. They allow scientists to observe organisms in ways that were previously impossible. The cameras can record in extreme detail, capturing the delicate structures of jellyfish and the hunting strategies of predatory fish. The lights can be adjusted or turned off entirely, allowing observation of bioluminescence in the natural darkness. And the duration of dives means that researchers can observe behaviors that unfold slowly, like feeding or mating, which might be missed during the brief visits possible with human-occupied submersibles. One particularly important application of ROVs has been in studying bioluminescence. By using blue LED lights instead of white lights, scientists can illuminate the scene while minimizing the disturbance to organisms that primarily see blue light. They've also deployed special cameras sensitive to the wavelengths of bioluminescence, allowing them to record the natural light shows produced by deep-sea creatures without needing artificial illumination. These techniques have revealed that the midnight zone is far more alive with light than anyone previously imagined, with organisms constantly signaling to each other in complex patterns that we're only beginning to decode. Autonomous underwater vehicles, or AUVs, represent another approach to deep ocean exploration. Unlike ROVs, which are connected to the surface by cables, AUVs are completely independent. They're programmed with a mission plan before deployment, and then they dive and navigate on their own, collecting data according to their programming. After completing their mission, they return to the surface to be recovered. AUVs are excellent for survey work, mapping large areas of the seafloor or measuring oceanographic properties over wide regions. They can't collect samples or react to unexpected discoveries the way ROVs can, but they can cover far more ground and can operate in conditions where tethering to a surface ship would be impractical. Deep-sea landers are yet another tool in the oceanographer's arsenal. These are instrument packages that are deployed from the surface and sink to the seafloor, where they carry out pre-programmed observations for hours or days. They might include cameras that take time-lapse photos, traps that capture small organisms, or sensors that record environmental conditions. When their mission is complete, the lander releases ballast and floats back to the surface for recovery. Landers are particularly useful for studying the communities of organisms that live on or near the seafloor at midnight zone depths. One of the most exciting recent developments in deep-sea exploration has been the use of bioluminescence as a research tool. Scientists have built electronic jellyfish, simple devices that mimic the bioluminescent alarm response of certain jellyfish species. When deployed in the deep ocean, these devices attract predators that would normally respond to the alarm by investigating or attacking. Cameras positioned nearby can then observe and record these predators. This technique has been extraordinarily successful, attracting species that are rarely seen otherwise, including giant squid, six-gill sharks, and numerous other elusive creatures. It's a form of biomimicry, using organisms' own signaling systems to study them in ways that minimize human disturbance. Despite all these technological advances, we've still explored only a tiny fraction of the midnight zone. The ocean is vast, and the resources available for deep-sea research are limited. Most of what we know comes from a few well-studied regions, particularly off the coasts of North America, Europe, and Japan, where research institutions have the technology and funding to support deep ocean studies. Vast regions of the ocean remain virtually unexplored. It's estimated that we've mapped less than 20% of the ocean floor at a resolution that would show features the size of a house, and we've visually observed far less than that. For the midnight zone, which exists throughout the water column above this largely unmapped floor, the percentage of explored space is even smaller. New species are discovered on nearly every deep-sea expedition. A single ROV dive might encounter dozens of organisms that have never been scientifically described, creatures that may be unique to a particular region, or that may be widespread, but have simply never been documented before. Some of these organisms are radically different from anything previously known, possessing body plans or adaptations that challenge our understanding of what's possible in living systems. The Midnight Zone, despite being one of Earth's largest habitats, remains a frontier, a place where exploration and discovery continue to reveal surprises that reshape our understanding of life on this planet. And now, as we drift here in the Midnight Zone, suspended in the cold, dark water, our journey through this hidden realm comes to a close. We've descended from the sun-bright surface, through the fading twilight, and into the absolute darkness of the bathypelagic depths. We've met remarkable creatures, from anglerfish with their glowing lures to vampire squid feeding patiently on drifting particles. We've witnessed the silent dance between predator and prey, the descent of marine snow like underwater winter, and the epic encounters between giants. We've explored adaptations that seem almost magical in their ingenuity, from bioluminescence to pressure resistance to the ability to survive in near darkness without ever seeing the sun. But more than anything, we've glimpsed a world that exists in parallel to our own, vast and ancient, operating according to its own rhythms and rules. The Midnight Zone is not a dead place, despite the darkness. It's not empty, despite the pressure and the cold. It's a living ecosystem, as complex and as beautiful as any coral reef or rainforest, just far harder to see and to understand. The creatures here are not relics or monsters. They're finely tuned products of evolution, perfectly adapted to their environment, thriving in conditions that seem impossible to us, but are simply home to them. The Midnight Zone reminds us how much of our planet remains mysterious, how much is still to be discovered. We've explored less than 5% of Earth's ocean, and the Midnight Zone represents a substantial portion of that unexplored volume. Every expedition brings new discoveries, new species, new behaviors, new questions. Scientists estimate there may be millions of species living in the deep ocean that science has never documented, forms of life we can't imagine because we've simply never encountered them. The next great discovery might be swimming through the darkness right now, unknown and unseen, waiting for the day when human technology and curiosity bring us together. But tonight is not about grand discoveries or scientific breakthroughs. Tonight is about rest. It's about letting your mind drift through these deep waters, following strange and beautiful creatures through their world, feeling the pressure and the darkness not as threats but as interesting qualities of a place unlike any other. The Midnight Zone asks nothing of you. You don't need to survive here or understand it completely or solve its mysteries. You can simply float, suspended in its cold embrace, letting its strangeness wash over you like a gentle current. The water here is nearly motionless, just the faintest stirring as deep ocean currents carry it slowly around the globe. The temperature is constant, 4 degrees Celsius, never changing. The pressure is immense but unchanging, a steady force pressing in from all sides. In this stability, in this darkness, there is a kind of peace. Nothing unexpected can happen here. No sudden storms, no crashing waves, no blinding light, just the slow drift of particles, the occasional flash of bioluminescence, the rare passage of a distant creature going about its timeless business. You are safe here, in this imagined dive into the Midnight Zone. The pressure cannot touch you, the cold cannot reach you, the darkness is not threatening but soothing, a blanket wrapped around your consciousness, shutting out the noise and chaos of the surface world. Here, in the largest habitat on Earth, in the realm where the sun never shines, there is room for everything and time for nothing. Hours pass like minutes, days pass like hours. The creatures here know how to wait, how to exist without rushing, without worry, without fear. And tonight, for a little while, you can do the same. Let yourself drift deeper into rest. Your breathing is slow and steady, like the gentle current in the deep ocean. Your thoughts are drifting like particles of marine snow falling slowly through layers of consciousness, settling gently on the floor of sleep. You are far from the surface now, far from the sunlight and the surface churn. You are in the Midnight Zone of your own rest, where everything is quiet and still and dark and safe. The anglerfish has finished its patient hunt, its stomach full, and it drifts now in the darkness, conserving energy. The vampire squid has collected its ball of marine snow and is slowly consuming it, its filaments retracted, its 8 arms curled protectively around its body. A sperm whale surfaces far above, taking a series of deep breaths before beginning its next long dive into the depths. A cloud of marine snow drifts past, carrying the nutrients from the sunlit world down to those who wait in darkness. And you are simply here, present in this moment, in this deep and peaceful place, letting go of everything except the gentle rhythm of your breath. The midnight zone continues, as it has for billions of years, as it will for billions more. The creatures swim and hunt and mate and die. The water flows in its ancient patterns. The particles fall in their endless rain. And far above on the surface, in the world of light and air, the sun rises and sets, the seasons turn, the years pass. But here, in the depths, none of that matters. Here there is only the eternal darkness, the unchanging cold, the patient stillness of deep water and deep time. Sleep well, rest deeply. Let the midnight zone hold you in its dark embrace where nothing can disturb you, nothing can harm you, nothing can reach you except the peace of the abyss. And when you wake, whenever that might be, you'll return to the surface slowly, gently, like a bubble of air rising through still water, carrying with you the memory of this place, this strange and beautiful realm where life exists in darkness and where peace is found in the depths. Good night.